The doctor's office in Denver smelled of antiseptic and shame. Catherine sat across from the physician, listening to words that would define the rest of her life. Barren, infertile, unable to bear children, broken in the most fundamental way a woman could be broken. At 28 years old, Catherine had believed her entire future was determined by her capacity to produce heirs. She had been raised to be a wife and mother. She had been educated to be decorative and agreeable. She had prepared for nothing else. And now, the single thing that had defined her purpose was being taken away. The scarring is extensive, the doctor said clinically. A previous infection, perhaps, or an illness. The damage is permanent. You will never conceive. Catherine felt the world tilt beneath her. She had been married for 5 years and had never become pregnant, something both she and her husband had attributed to God's timing. But it wasn't timing. It was finality. She was broken. Her husband's reaction confirmed what she had always secretly feared, that without the ability to bear children, she was worthless. Within months of receiving the diagnosis, he had begun staying away from home. Within a year, he had filed for divorce, claiming incompatibility. What he meant was, "You are useless to me." The divorce was processed quickly and quietly, keeping the scandal to a minimum. Catherine was given a small settlement, enough to survive for a few years if she was careful, but not enough to build any kind of independent life. At 28, she was damaged goods on the marriage market. No respectable man would want a barren woman. Her only options were to become a spinster or to become someone's mistress. She chose neither. Instead, Catherine took work as a governess, caring for other women's children. Children she could never have of her own. She moved from household to household, always temporary, always aware that she was filling a role that could be filled by someone younger, more acceptable, someone not broken. She moved through her days with quiet dignity, pretending that the ache of childlessness didn't threaten to consume her, pretending that being deemed effective didn't define her every waking moment. It was while working for a family in Boulder that she encountered Samuel Garrett. Samuel was a wealthy rancher in his early 50s who had hired Catherine to be a governess for his 3 children, a son of 8 and twin daughters of 6. He was widowed, his wife having died giving birth to the twins. He was doing his best to raise 3 children alone, but he needed help, and Catherine came recommended as capable and gentle with children. Samuel was not looking for romance. He was not seeking another wife. He was simply looking for someone who could manage his household and care for his children with genuine warmth rather than obligation. What he found, instead, was a woman of remarkable strength hiding beneath a facade of quiet resignation. Catherine arrived at the ranch and immediately took over the management of the household with brilliant competence. But more importantly, she loved the children not performatively but genuinely. She read to them. She taught them. She held them when they had nightmares. She became, in all meaningful ways, the mother they had lost. Samuel watched her with the children and saw something that took his breath away. A woman who was clearly meant to be a mother, who was naturally suited to it, who poured love into 3 children who were not biologically hers. And he wondered what had brought her to this position, why she wasn't married with children of her own. It took him 3 months to ask. "Catherine," he said one evening as she was finishing paperwork related to the household accounts, "I've noticed that you're extraordinary with my children. The way you care for them, the way they've opened up to you, it's remarkable. I'm curious about you, about your past. Have you ever had children of your own?" Catherine's hand stilled. This was the question she had been dreading since she arrived at the ranch. The question that would inevitably lead to judgment, rejection, and dismissal. "No," she said quietly. "I was married once. My husband believed I would bear children. I couldn't. He left me, and I resigned myself to a life of caring for other people's children." She didn't look at Samuel as she spoke, expecting his expression to shift from respect to pity or worse, disgust. Instead, he asked a question that changed her understanding of her own worth. Why would he leave you for being unable to bear children, when clearly you're the finest mother any children could have? Catherine looked up at him, stunned. "I'm barren," she said, the word tasting like shame. "That makes me defective. Worthless." Samuel moved closer, and his expression was serious in a way that suggested he was about to say something important. Catherine, he said, his voice steady and clear, a woman's value is not determined by her ability to reproduce. You are not a breeding animal. You're a human being. And your worth, your actual worth, is demonstrated every single day in the way you love my children, in the way you manage this household, in the intelligence and grace you bring to every aspect of your life. He paused, and Catherine saw something in his eyes that looked like genuine conviction. If anything, Samuel continued, your inability to bear biological children has freed you to be a better mother to my 3, because you're not nursing them for selfish genetic reasons. You're loving them because they deserve to be loved. That's the kind of motherhood I want for them, and that's the kind of woman I want in my life. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. For years, she had internalized a judgment that she was broken, that her inability to have biological children made her fundamentally defective as a woman. And now, a man was telling her that this very thing, this very limitation, was what made her exceptional. Over the following months, something unexpected began to happen. Catherine began to believe that she had value, that her barrenness didn't define her, that she could be treasured not despite her limitations, but for the strength and character those limitations had forced her to develop. Samuel began to treat her differently. He asked her opinions about running the ranch. He sought her counsel on decisions affecting his household. He treated her not as an employee, but as a partner. And most importantly, he looked at her with an expression that suggested he saw not a damaged woman, but a treasure. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the ranch house watching the sun set, Samuel took Catherine's hand. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice carrying the weight of significance. And I need you to understand that your answer doesn't change your position here. You can say no, and your life remains exactly as it is. You have employment, you have a home, you have my respect and gratitude. Catherine's heart began to race. She thought she knew what was coming, and the thought terrified her. I have come to love you, Samuel continued, not as an employee or as a substitute for my deceased wife, but as a woman in your own right, a woman I want to build a life with. I want to marry you, Catherine, not to fix you or save you, but because I want to spend the rest of my life with someone I respect, admire, and love. Will you marry me? Catherine felt something break open inside her, not from pain, but from the overwhelming realization that she was being chosen. Chosen not despite her inability to bear children, but by a man who had watched her be a mother to his children and had recognized that as the true expression of her worth. Yes, she said through tears. Yes, I'll marry you. Their wedding took place at the ranch, attended by neighbors and the people who had come to respect Catherine for her capable management and genuine warmth. And as Catherine spoke her vows, she understood something profound. Motherhood wasn't about biology. It was about love, commitment, and the daily choice to put another person's well-being before your own. As Samuel's wife, Catherine had standing in society. But more importantly, she had validation from Samuel, from his children, from everyone around her, that she was not damaged goods. She was treasured. She was valued. She was home. Over the following years, Catherine became known throughout Wyoming not as a barren woman, but as a woman who had helped raise 3 exceptional children. Samuel's son became a successful businessman who attributed his values to his mother's, Catherine's, teachings. The twin daughters became educators, dedicated to improving access to schooling for rural children. And Catherine became an advocate for women whose value society had determined was diminished by their inability to bear biological children. She wrote letters to newspapers. She testified before community gatherings. She became a voice for the idea that motherhood, real motherhood, was not determined by biology, but by commitment and love. Years later, when people asked Catherine about the moment Samuel had said, "You're my greatest treasure," about the moment she had understood that her barrenness didn't define her, she spoke with the kind of clarity that comes from genuine transformation. I had accepted a terrible lie, Catherine would say. I had believed that a woman's worth was determined by her ability to bear children. I had internalized society's judgment that I was defective, broken, disposable. When Samuel looked at me and said I was his greatest treasure, not despite my inability to have biological children, but perhaps in part because it meant I was free to love his children without the complications of genetic inheritance. He gave me permission to see myself differently. She would pause, emotion visible on her face. He taught me that damaged goods is a judgment society makes, not a truth about who we are. She would continue. My barrenness didn't damage me. The world's response to my barrenness damaged me. But a man who refused to accept that world's judgment, a man who saw treasure where the world saw trash. He healed me simply by insisting on seeing my true worth. When Samuel died at 83, Catherine was at his side. They had been together for 32 years. 32 years of proving that a family built on choice rather than biology could be just as real, just as meaningful, just as transformative as any other. At his funeral, Catherine spoke about the man who had refused to accept society's judgment about her value, who had demonstrated through his every action that she was treasured, and who had taught their children to see motherhood as an act of love rather than an act of biology. He called me his greatest treasure, Catherine said, her voice strong and clear. Not because I was young or beautiful or conventionally valuable, but because he saw me, really saw me, and recognized that my strength, my character, my capacity to love without expectation of biological reward, that was treasure. Through his love, he taught me to see myself the same way. And through my life with him, I hope I taught countless other women that their value is not determined by their reproductive capacity. Catherine lived for another 7 years after Samuel's death. She spent those years continuing his work in her own, establishing scholarships for children raised in non-traditional families, advocating for changes in laws about inheritance and legitimacy, and most importantly, helping other women understand that barrenness was not a curse, but sometimes a path to a different kind of motherhood, a different kind of family, a different kind of treasure. On her grave, simple words were inscribed. Samuel Garrett. She was told she was damaged goods. A rancher called her his greatest treasure. Through her life, she showed countless women their true worth. And in Wyoming, the Garrett Foundation, established to support families built on love rather than biology, continued the legacy of two people who understood that the greatest treasures in life are not those that come naturally, but those that are chosen, built, nurtured, and fought for with every ounce of love and commitment you possess.